At the neighborhood harbor, Tyler and his date Margot hang tight for the boat that will take them to a confidential island where they'll feast at Hawthorn, a very select eatery worked by the best culinary expert in the country. Tyler's a foodie fixated on this culinary specialist and the subtleties behind high-end food overall. At the point when the boat shows up, both of them are stunned to perceive the number of notable individuals that will go with them. There's Lillian, the food pundit that found the culinary expert, and her manager Ted, post-prime entertainer George with his right hand and sweetheart Felicity, and a threesome of significant tech business financial backers, Dave, Soren, and Bryce. The ones that definitely stand out, however, are financial specialist Richard and his significant other Anne, on the grounds that Margot knows Richard and doesn't believe he should know she's there, so she attempts to avoid his sight. During the excursion, they're now served the primary extravagant dish, and Tyler spouts over it while he snaps a photo. Yet Margot isn't intrigued. At the point when they at last show up at the island, the maitre d' Elsa calls Margot an alternate name, so Tyler needs to make sense if there was a course change, and he accompanied an alternate date, making what is happening really abnormal. Prior to eating, there's a visit for the visitors, and Elsa shows the visitors every one of the offices, while making sense of the cafe's representatives do all the hunting and cultivating. That is the reason everybody lives here. The gourmet expert likewise resides on the island, yet his home's forbidden. A short time later they at last enter the eatery, where they find the kitchen is an open region that permits them to watch the cooks work. There's additionally an old woman named Linda on one of the tables, who looks like doesn't have a place by any means. At the point when Richard at last notification Margot's presence, he requests that his significant other trade seats with him, so he can have a superior view. Elsa illuminates everybody that they can watch the cooks work, however pictures aren't permitted. Tyler quickly draws nearer to call attention to every one of the methods they're utilizing, and poses lots of inquiries, so the cooks need to request that he quit diverting them. At that point, culinary expert Slowik shows up, and Elsa lets him know something that makes him gaze at Margot. The primary dish is the free starter. Lillian takes as much time as is needed with the food, smelling and tasting everything cautiously, except Felicity is in the middle of attempting to say a final farewell to George. Margot likes the dish yet isn't super into it, so Tyler needs to egotistically make sense of why this is so significant. Minutes after the fact, it's the ideal opportunity for the primary course. Slowik approaches and applauds his hand to make every one of his cooks pivot simultaneously like devoted little troopers. Then he offers a discourse about his work, and reminds everybody that they shouldn't simply eat, they ought to enjoy and savor. Tyler attempts to say something on that, and just gets reproved by Slowik for intruding. Tyler actually takes pictures regardless of whether it's taboo. Once more, for the subsequent course, Slowik applauds and makes sense of that bread's the food of the everyday person, except since his visitors aren't normal, consequently they aren't getting any bread. The following dish is a breadless bread plate, just little drops of the flavorful backups are on the plate. Tyler totally cherishes it, yet Margot thinks that it is annoying. Lillian figures the emulsion looks somewhat split, and as an unexpected reaction, they send an entire bowl of it to her table. The Tech brothers think the joke is running excessively far, and request bread, however they're denied in any event. When they call attention to they work for Doug Varick, the genuine proprietor of the island. To quiet them down, Elsa creepily lets them know that they will eat short of what they want, and more than they merit. Margot will not eat her dish, and Tyler attempts to take it for himself, just to break a glass in the process coincidentally. Slowik promptly gets together, and Tyler attempts to apologize, however the cook is more keen on knowing why Margot isn't eating. Margot brings up there is no food, and Slowik answers that he painstakingly planned the size of the bits, so in the event that she doesn't eat, she won't top off. Margot actually will not touch the dish, making Slowik leave rather irritated and shock everybody by tenderly minding Linda. Margot can't resist the urge to go to take a gander at Richard, and Anne sees this, making her point out that Margot seems to be their dead girl. Richard imagines he doesn't know Margot and requests that his significant other redirect the conversation. With another applaud, Slowik reports the third course called memory, which prompts him to share a memory about his family's old taco evenings. He uncovers Linda's his mom, and that she's been plastered since he was a youngster. His dad was an alcoholic first, and one evening, Linda called him out for it, so the man attempted to kill her with the telephone rope. To save his mom, little Slowik got some scissors and cut his dad in the thigh, yet presently he laments not having killed him. To recall that extraordinary taco night, the dish is a smoked chicken thigh presented with some scissors in it on top of a telephone line. The tortillas were made new, however, to add a dash of development. They've been engraved with a laser machine. Everybody is upset by the story, yet things get much more off-kilter when they find the recollections on the tortillas. Lillian finds pictures of eateries that shut as a result of her terrible surveys, and Anne is stunned to see photos of her better half's confidential life. One specifically shows Richard going out with a peculiar lady, yet Richard swears it's simply a trick. George tracks down photos of his job as specialist Daylight, a film that did dreadful when it emerged, and the Tech brothers are upset to find their organization's duty records that demonstrate they've made solicitations with counterfeit charges. Elsa will not make sense of how they gained that data, and when the men compromise with shutting everything down place, Elsa mysteriously says it won't be essential. Tyler sees himself taking photos of the food and thinks Slowik can't stand him. Margot finds the pictures annoying and needs to send the dish back. However, Tyler speaks harshly to her and calls her a kid for not acting accurately. Hurt, Margot chooses to go to the restroom, and Elsa races to prevent her from entering an illegal silver entryway. At the point when she comes to the washroom, Margot draws near to the window to have a smoke and notification a representative running with a couple of heavenly messenger wings in his arms. At that point, Slowik comes to ask Margot for what good reason she would not eat again, since he's inclination injured by her demeanor. Yet Margot simply says she isn't just eager. Slowik likewise needs to know who she truly is, and when she says she's only Margot from Nebraska, Slowik doesn't trust her. After a second, the cooks start the arrangements for the fourth course by putting a piece of texture and a few embellishments on the floor. Slowik acquaints everybody with Jeremy, one of his top assistant chefs who made the following dish called the Wreck. Jeremy concentrated on in a significant culinary school, and his fantasy has forever been to work for Slowik, and keeping in mind that Slowik concedes he's capable, he doesn't think Jeremy is perfect. Jeremy might need a day-to-day existence brimming with distinction like Slowik's, yet Slowik thinks his life is loaded with pressure. Also, every one of the troubled clients and pundits that will not see the value in his work. Slowik inquires as to whether he needs that life, and when Jeremy says no, Slowik kisses him on the 2 cheeks and steps back before Jeremy takes out a firearm. Then, at that point, Slowik declares the fourth course, and Jeremy closes things before anybody. Different cooks aren't astonished by this and watch seriously. However, every one of the visitors go crazy and step back with the exception of Tyler, who views this as intriguing. As the body is removed, Slowik requests that everybody plunk down and acknowledge this is important for the show. Everybody starts examining in the event that the passing had been genuine or not, and Richard has had enough. He attempts to leave with Anne. However, Elsa stops him, making sense of there's no accessible boat. Richard actually demands, making Elsa request the culinary experts to get him and get his ring finger. Visitors begin going ballistic again aside from Tyler, who is as yet partaking in his feast without a consideration. While Richard squirms on the floor in torment, Elsa returns the fallen wedding band to Anne. Slowik by and by makes sense of this is important for the menu, and Lillian acknowledges it. However, the others are beginning to get apprehensive. Felicity believes that George should sit down to chat with Slowik, since probably they're companions, yet George admits he deceived and intrigued her. Elsa brings Margot to the kitchen, where Slowik tells her she's essentially off base. He can see she isn't a Margot, and that is an issue, since she wasn't essential for that unique menu plan. Slowik is curious as to whether Margot is on the visitors or the eateries. It probably won't make any difference since everybody's withering this evening in any case. Margot surges back to her table in tears and slaps Tyler when he won't quit discussing the food. The entire state of mind in the cafe is tense and apprehensive. Soren goes off the deep end and chooses to attempt to break a window with the seat, yet it's made of strong glass, so Elsa simply returns him to his table. The following course is tea filled in as a bed chemical, and Slowik takes the risk to ask in the event that anybody has any inquiries. Tyler makes an idiotic inquiry regarding the tea. However, George comes through and considers what's happening. Slowik makes sense of their fixings and a degustation idea. However, this ought not be a shock. For instance, Lillian is a beast that makes cafes close due to her own taste, and Ted indulges her. The cooks bring more broken emulsion for Lillian, and Elsa presents to Margot a kitchen clock, saying she has 10 minutes. Then Anne requests a specialist for Richard, so Slowik brings up they've been the most steadfast clients for a long time at this point. They can't name a solitary dish they've eaten here. Slowik attempted to turn into an exceptionally elite culinary specialist, yet it was only after, as of late, that he at long last perceived he's been attempting to fulfill individuals that can't be fulfilled, similar to his own mom. Since Slowik continues to allude to the spot as his cafe, Bryce advises him that the real proprietor is Doug Varick. Slowik answers he really claims Doug himself, and at that point it's uncovered that Doug is balancing outside while wearing the holy messenger wings. Dave attempts to offer cash to save him, and when Slowik turns him down, he attempts to take off, just to be come by the staff. Bryce calls attention to Doug kept Slowik open through the pandemic. However, Slowik grumbles that Doug continued to scrutinize his menu. Elsa makes a sign with her arms, and Doug is brought down into the ocean until he suffocates, inciting Slowik to report he's at last free, prior to going to his office. Abruptly, the clock on Margot's table rings, and she's approached to go see Slowik. Margot concedes she shouldn't be here, and consequently Slowik concedes he can tell Margot's an individual industry laborer. He needs to know why Margot continued gazing at Richard, causing her to admit that she's really a road laborer. Richard had been one of a handful of the clients that figured out how to shake her, since he believed that her should claim to be his little girl. while they were getting lively. Both Slowik and Margot concur that they used to appreciate serving others, and awful clients have made them can't stand their positions. Thereafter, Slowik takes everybody outside. The following course is introduced by top assistant chef Catherine, who makes sense of Slowik has played with her multiple occasions, and she's constantly said no. Slowik didn't fire her, however quit looking at her without flinching, and this propelled the following dish, called man's indiscretion. Then Catherine cuts Slowik on his leg and embraces him prior to smudging his gourmet specialist uniform with blood, provoking him to apologize. Presently every one of the male visitors are allowed an opportunity to get away. They'll have an early advantage of 45 seconds, and afterward, the staff will attempt to get them. Every one of the men start running aside from Tyler, so Slowik needs to send him out there, while Catherine takes the ladies inside. The ladies attempt the 6th course while imparting a table to Catherine, who makes sense of everybody kicks the bucket was her thought. Lillian's commendations make her cry, and the wide range of various women start offering praises also to keep her cheerful. Anne inquires as to whether she knows her significant other, and Margot concedes she does, yet Anne doesn't remark on it. Margot winds up conceding her genuine name is Erin, and she's from Massachusetts. Outside, Tyler keeps an eye on them through the window, since he can't stand that he's feeling the loss of a course. In the meantime, the staff pursues the men and tracks down them without any issues, regardless assuming they went to the woodland or the ocean side. Ted concealed in the smokehouse, and for his endeavors he's given a password egg. Every one of the men are taken back to the cafe, and George Riley apologizes to Felicity for being a disappointment, which makes her concede she's been taking cash from him. George definitely knew, and Felicity realized he knew. Unexpectedly, Slowik declares the menu can't go on as arranged until they settle an unsettled matter. He moves toward Tyler and spreads the word about him, admit that he had forever this evening's menu would incorporate. Everybody kicks the bucket. Tyler had a date, however his better half said a final farewell to him, so he employed Margot on the grounds that the cafe didn't take bookings for only one, never thinking often about the reality she'd kick the bucket. Margot's annoyed about this disclosure and assaults Tyler, yet the staff rapidly pulls them separated. Next, Slowik brings up how much Tyler is familiar with food and gifts him a culinary specialist's uniform, prior to driving into the kitchen, requesting that he cook before everybody, regardless of whether Tyler need to. Tyler's cooking is muddled, particularly since Slowik continues ridiculing him for being Mr. Knowledgeable Foodie, meaning the last dish is a flat-out catastrophe. Slowik tells Tyler he's the reason the secret has been depleted from his specialty, and murmurs something in his ear that makes Tyler remove the cook code and run in tears. A while later, Slowik approaches Margot to request some help. To begin planning sweet, they require a huge barrel that should be in a corner, however Elsa neglected to bring. Slowik believes Margot should go get it and overlooks Elsa when she says the staff can make it happen. On out, Margot finds Tyler has finished things for himself, however she couldn't care less. Then, at that point, Slowik gets back to the feasting region, where George brings up that this isn't exactly fair. Slowik makes sense of George's being rebuffed on the grounds that he saw a specialist daylight quite a while back and destroyed the first 3-day weekend he had in quite a while. Then again, Felicity'll kick the bucket since she moved on from earthy colored college with next to no understudy obligation. In the meantime, Margot comes to the smokehouse, yet rather than getting the barrel, she snatches a blade. A short time later she slips into Slowik's home, which is a precise duplicate of the eatery, however with a bed in it. Margot attempts to leave through the silver entryway. However, she's interfered with by Elsa, who has her own blade, and reminds her this region is out of cutoff points. Abruptly, Elsa assaults Margot, making sense of she would rather not be supplanted. Margot shields herself with objects from the kitchen, as she calls attention to she would rather not work here. Yet Elsa says she remembered the barrel. Slowik only never requested it. The two ladies wind up striving on the floor, and by attempting to get the blade far from her body, Margot winds up incidentally killing Elsa. After her underlying frenzy is finished, Margot takes Elsa's keys and opens the silver entryway. There she tracks down a basic room with Slowik's recollections from when he was more youthful and more joyful with a family and a task making cheeseburgers. There's likewise a radio in the room, and Margot attempts to utilize it to call for help. Back in the cafe, Bryce is given a cake since his companions had let the eatery know that it was his birthday. Margot out of nowhere hinders by entering with the barrel through the fundamental entryway, and Slowik tells her he used to be a beast. However, all that he does today is unadulterated. His cook hand's areas of strength 4 are such an extent that he can contact fire without feeling torment, since he can presently not be harmed. At that point, a boat moves toward the island, and Slowik acknowledges Margot utilized the radio. The staff promptly cleans all hints of blood from everybody, and Slowik conveys an intimidation. On the off chance that the visitors request help, a blameless man will bite the dust. Coast watchman Dale enters the eatery and asks what the issue is, yet no one considers talking. Then Dale sees George and requests his signature since he loves specialist daylight, so George professes to give him one. At the point when Dale is going to leave, he finds the piece of paper really says help us and takes out a firearm, prepared to protect the visitors that presently are sufficiently bold to talk. Dale saves the firearm on Slowik for a couple of moments just to pivot and point it at the candle on Margot's table. Uncovering it, simply a lighter molded like a weapon unexpectedly. Dale isn't a coast monitor. He's one more individual from Slowik's staff, and presently he can get back to the kitchen. Slowik's extremely frustrated in Margot for having sold out him, and pronounces her to be basically as terrible as different visitors. Margot recalls what she found in the house, and chooses to face a challenge. She abruptly applauds to definitely stand out, reporting that she could do without his food, and that she might want to send it back. Slowik succumbs to Margot's manipulative strategies, as she calls attention to every one of the dishes were a scholarly activity as opposed to something to appreciate. She's as yet ravenous, so she needs to eat a legitimate cheeseburger, not some extravagant, dismantled crap. Without precedent for the day, Slowik grins and acknowledges to set up a conventional cheeseburger with fries for $9.95. Every one of the cooks watch with interest how cheerful Slowik looks setting up a conventional cheeseburger, which he presents to Margot with pride. Margot gives it a chomp and endorses the taste, yet she likewise believes it's a lot for her to get done, and requests the rest to go. Slowik's still in a daze, so she does as he says, and when Margot has her pack, she leaves a $10 note and leaves the eatery. On out, Margot wavers in light of the fact that the others are still at serious risk. However, Anne advises her to go with a signal. While Margot comes to the harbor and escapes on the boat Dale abandoned, Slowik reminds everybody is an ideal opportunity to pay. The expense is $12.50 for each head under a no-tip framework, and everybody gets a sack of treats that incorporates one of Doug's fingers. Everybody hands their visas, and after a second, Slowik declares it's the ideal opportunity for dessert. The cooks start brightening the floor as though it was a plate. Then they put chocolate caps and marshmallow vests on the visitors. Slowik reminds everybody they address the destruction of his life, and presently they will be important for it. So the pastry will be the most over-the-top hostile attack on the human sense of taste. The s'more. This is normally ready over a fire. Subsequently, Slowik snatches a chunk of coal from the stove with his exposed hands and declares it purifying. As he tosses it on the embellishments the cooks left, causing a fire that assumes control over the eatery and every one individuals in it. In the meantime, Margot stops the boat to complete her cheeseburger while watching the cafe consume, utilizing the duplicate of the menu that accompanied the gift pack to wipe her mouth.